They say life changes in loud moments, heartbreaks, accidents, confessions. But sometimes, it begins with silence. With something so small, you don't even know it matters until everything feels different. For me, it wasn't a grand event. It wasn't a scandal or betrayal. It was a quiet afternoon, a soft hum outside, the scent of freshly laundered sheets, and a voice calling my name. A belt jammed, a moment of vulnerability, and suddenly I found myself looking at someone I thought I knew, and seeing him for the first time. This is not a story about forbidden love. It's about boundaries, about kindness, about the aching spaces between what's right, what's human, and what we sometimes feel when life grows quiet. I never expected that day to stay with me, but it did, and it changed everything. Not through chaos, but through the quiet clarity of knowing something had shifted. It started like any other day. The sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting golden light across the living room. The house was quiet, peaceful, the kind of morning that felt suspended in time. I was standing by the window, folding warm laundry fresh from the dryer, my fingers moving slowly over the fabric. There was nothing remarkable about it, really. Just another quiet moment in a quiet life. The faint hum of a lawnmower buzzed in the distance, mixing with the occasional chirp of birds outside. If someone had asked me then, I would have told them I felt content, safe, settled. But looking back now, I wonder if that stillness wasn't just comfort but complacency. And then I heard his voice. "Emma, can you help me with this?" Noah called from the hallway. There was something strained in his tone. Not panic, not urgency, but frustration laced with embarrassment. I turned toward the sound and saw him standing awkwardly at the bottom of the stairs. His khaki shorts hung unevenly on his hips, one hand clumsily gripping the waistband. "My belt's stuck," he said, managing a sheepish smile. I set the towels aside and walked over to him. "Let me take a look." Since Noah had moved back in a few weeks earlier, a decision Peter, my husband, made with little discussion, I tried to make things easy for him. Noah had always been polite, a little distant but kind. He was Peter's son from his previous marriage, and I'd only seen him a handful of times during holidays. Now 24, he'd returned after college, uncertain about his next steps. He was adjusting, and I was too. I knelt slightly and examined the twisted leather strap. "It really is jammed," I murmured, focusing on the buckle. My fingers worked carefully, gently tugging to free it. Noah stood still. Too still. And then, without warning, the buckle gave way. The shorts slipped straight down around his ankles. Time froze. Noah stiffened in place, and I instinctively looked down before immediately snapping my gaze back up. Heat rushed to my face. "I'm sorry," I whispered, not even sure who I was apologizing for, him or me. He quickly pulled his shorts up, red-faced and breathless. "I didn't mean. I just thanks." I smiled quickly, trying to restore a sense of normalcy. "It's fine. Happens to the best of us." But the moment lingered, like a drop of ink in still water. It spread slow and quiet, coloring the space between us with something unspoken. Not desire, not impropriety, just awareness. He nodded, muttered something, and disappeared up the stairs. And I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the empty staircase, telling myself it was nothing, just an accident. Just an awkward moment in an ordinary day. But deep down I knew something had shifted. We never spoke about the moment. Not that day. Not in the days that followed. It was easier that way, to let it pass quietly, like a gust of wind that rustled the curtains but didn't tip anything over. Still, something had changed, even if neither of us acknowledged it. First, it was subtle. Noah began lingering more. He'd appear in the kitchen while I was cooking, leaning against the counter, sharing stories about his college life, little things. The roommate he didn't get along with, the professor who inspired him. I listened, smiled, asked questions. Felt harmless. It was harmless, but it was also new. He'd sit on the living room floor with his sketchbook while I folded laundry, his pencil moving in smooth, thoughtful strokes. He was talented, really talented. One afternoon I leaned over to look. "These are beautiful," I said, genuinely impressed. He looked up, and for a moment there was a flicker in his eyes, something soft and surprised. "You really think so?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Absolutely. You see things in a way most people don't." He smiled then, but it wasn't cocky. It was grateful. Like he'd needed to hear that more than I realized. "You're the first person who's said that," he murmured. And again I felt that ripple, that awareness. Not inappropriate, not even romantic. Just close. There's a kind of intimacy that comes not from touch or words, but from being seen. And in those moments I realized Noah saw me, not as his father's wife, not as someone twice his age, but as a person. And I saw him too, not as a boy under my roof, but as someone slowly finding himself, quietly searching for connection in a house that didn't quite feel like his. Still, I reminded myself, kindness has boundaries, and it was up to me to hold them. But boundaries are funny things. They blur slowly, not with actions but with comfort, with routine, with trust. And it wasn't that anything happened. It was that suddenly I was aware of his presence, his energy, the way his voice softened when he spoke to me, the way he looked at me like I mattered. Peter, as always, was busy. His job took him away, physically, mentally. His calls, his meetings, his routines. And I understood. I never blamed him, but I couldn't help noticing that it was Noah who filled the silences now. And the silences had grown long. It happened one evening, one of those in-between moments after dinner, when the house was quiet and the dishes were halfway done. I was standing at the sink, my hands in warm soapy water, the clinking of plates keeping me company. I didn't hear him approach, but I felt him. "Emma," Noah said softly behind me. His voice wasn't playful like usual. It carried weight. I paused but didn't turn. "Yes." He hesitated, and then, "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. About the other day. With the belt." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "It was awkward," he continued, his voice small. "But I never meant to make you uncomfortable." I turned to face him. His hair was damp from a shower, his posture tense. But his eyes were open, sincere, even a little scared. "I know you didn't," I said gently. "It was just a moment. These things happen." He looked down, then back up. "Still, I've been thinking about it. About everything lately." There was something in the air. A tension not of desire, but of emotional vulnerability. The kind that shows up when someone begins to confuse kindness for connection, or loneliness for love. And in that moment I knew I had to say the words. Not to scold, not to push away, but to protect us both. "Noah," I said quietly, "you're a good person, and you've been through a lot. I know this house hasn't always felt like yours. I know you miss having someone who sees you." He swallowed hard. "But what you're feeling," I continued, "it might not be what you think. It might just be comfort, closeness. And that's okay. We all need connection. But there are lines we don't cross, not because we don't care, but because we do." He didn't argue. He just stood there, eyes cast downward, his shoulders rising and falling with a heavy breath. "I understand," he said at last. I just didn't want you to think I was being careless. You matter to me, and you matter to me too, I replied honestly. Which is why we respect what we've built here. We protect it. He nodded slowly, and something in his expression shifted. Not sadness exactly, but understanding. Maybe even a touch of relief. That night, I sat alone in the garden after everyone had gone to bed. The stars above blinked quietly, indifferent to the weight of human hearts. I had done the right thing. But it didn't make it easy, because sometimes the hardest thing isn't resisting what's wrong. It's holding on to what's right, when no one else is watching. The garden had always been my sanctuary. I'd spent countless mornings and quiet afternoons among the roses and lavender, pruning, weeding, watering, tending not just to the plants, but to the spaces within myself that needed silence to heal. It was where I went to breathe, to think, to remember who I was beneath the layers of habit and responsibility. So it didn't surprise me when Noah found me there. It was late afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long golden rays through the hedges. I was crouched near the climbing roses, clipping dead blooms with care, when I heard the soft crunch of footsteps behind me. "You're always out here," he said gently. I didn't look up at first. "It's peaceful," I replied, my hands still busy with the shears. "And it keeps me grounded." He stepped closer, but not too close. "I think you're avoiding me." I paused, then slowly stood, brushing dirt from my gloves. I turned to him. "I'm not avoiding you, Noah," I said calmly. "I'm being careful." He nodded as if he understood, but didn't retreat. His expression was open, vulnerable, the way someone looks when they've built up the courage to speak. "I keep thinking about what you said," he murmured. "About connection, about lines. I've been trying to sort it all out in my head." I didn't interrupt. I waited. "I know what I'm feeling isn't simple," he went on. "It's confusing, but it's real. And I guess I needed to say it out loud." His honesty struck me not as a threat, but as a cry for clarity, for something solid to hold on to in the fog of emotion. I stepped closer, my voice steady but soft. "Noah, I admire your courage to say that. Truly. And I care about you. Enough to not let this become something it shouldn't." He looked down, shame brushing across his face. I reached out gently, resting a gloved hand on his arm. Not intimately, but as a gesture of reassurance. "You're not wrong for wanting to feel close to someone," I said. "We all want that, especially when life feels uncertain. But love, real love, always protects. It doesn't take advantage of silence. It doesn't blur what's sacred." He swallowed hard. "So what now?" I smiled softly, the kind of smile that carries both hope and boundary. "Now," I said, "we keep being kind to each other. We keep choosing the right thing. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." The wind rustled through the rose bushes, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and bloom. Noah took a breath and nodded. "Okay," he whispered. "I can do that." And I believed him, because sometimes when two people meet in a moment of vulnerability, it's not about falling into something forbidden. It's about rising above it together. With grace, with dignity, and with kindness. Things didn't return to the way they were before, but maybe they weren't supposed to. After that conversation in the garden, there was a quiet shift. Not dramatic, not sudden. Just a gentle rebalancing, like the way wind calms after a storm, or how a heart learns to beat steadily again after racing too fast. Noah kept his word. He didn't linger in the kitchen quite as long. He stopped looking for excuses to hover nearby. But when we crossed paths in the hallway, at the table in the garden, there was no awkwardness, no guilt, no tension. Only something calm, something clear. and that clarity felt like peace. Peter never noticed the undercurrents that had once flowed through our home. Or perhaps in his own quiet way he did, and chose to trust us with the silence. Either way, our lives settled back into a rhythm, familiar, predictable, and safe. Sometimes I'd catch Noah sketching again, now in the backyard under the maple tree, or by the window in the guest room. His drawings changed. They were softer somehow, lighter, as if something within him had shifted, too. One morning as I passed by, I glanced at one of his sketches, a garden scene with roses in bloom, and in the background, a figure kneeling with shears in hand. It was me. He looked up, caught me looking, and smiled. "I hope you don't mind," he said quietly. "It's just, this place has given me more than I expected." I returned the smile genuinely. "So has your being here." We didn't need to say more. Sometimes the most powerful understanding doesn't require many words, just presence and the willingness to grow. That spring, I started teaching an art therapy class at the local community center. Noah volunteered to help. He didn't say much, but the way he encouraged the children, the way he listened to the elderly who came in just to sketch flowers, spoke volumes. And I watched from a quiet distance, proud of who he was becoming. Our story was never about romance. It was about recognizing the thin line between need and attachment, and choosing, even in the hardest moments, to protect what's right. It was about being human but also being honorable. And above all, it was about kindness. The kind that doesn't always come easy but stays long after the emotions fade, long after the moments pass.